Chapter 61. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. As if to protect me from anything, the back standing in front of me was immense and immovable. Astana looked at Perez as if he was underestimating Perez. You dare to aim your sword at me? Maybe you forgot the sword in your hand. Astana said, gritted his teeth in anger. I pretended to see my father, to see the situation behind me. My grandfather got up halfway from his seat, staring at Astana with her burning and killing gaze, and my father was white-faced and tried to run to save me. But, my father stopped because of a hand holding his arm. It was Emperor Yovan's. Your Majesty. My father got surprised, but the emperor did not look at him. They were watching the two children standing with their swords at each other with interesting faces. When the emperor's reaction was like that, the knights who tried to intervene also retreated. Then Astana was rather excited. It seemed to me, he thinks the emperor had taken his side and laid a platform for stepping on Perez. The tip of the sword, still aiming at me, touched me like a smiling face. What are you going to do? I think you've started confidently today. Know your place. Astana, who laughed at Perez in the middle, stopped talking and took turns looking at Perez with me. Ah, you both have lowly mothers, so must feel the same thing. As expected from Astana. I mean, I'll get you too. Your Majesty the First Prince. Eventually, my father, who couldn't stand it, vented his anger. However, Astana, who glanced at my father, confirmed the emperor who was still silent and continued to sarcastic. Do you dare aim your sword at me, the only heir of the empire? Astana said so and swung his sword heavily. Of course, you would have thought you would win. But when Perez was so small and young he already learning swordsmanship, the period of learning swordsmanship is longer than yours. With all his might, the weight bearing sword came out and fell toward Perez. No, it must be me behind Perez who was still being targeted by the sword tip. I stared straight at Astana without backing down. What? To see that face. The top of Astana's confident sword was cut off and fell to the floor. For it was a very neat cross section. This is now. Astana, who looked at his sword cut in half, speechless for a long time. Then he yelled at Perez. You bastard. What a cowardly move. Get back. What kind of cowardice did you do? To Perez's cold voice seemed to have fueled the fire, and Astana lost his temper. Look at that crazy guy. Ah! He screamed because he couldn't beat Perez and he looked around. No, Your Majesty the Prince. No. Give me. The knight, who couldn't completely block the prince's hand, ended up losing his sword to Astana. Shouldn't it be prevented? The knight looked at the emperor with such eyes, but there was no movement. The knight, unable to hold the prince's body without permission, only looks at his sword in Astana's hand. Cool. Astana now swung the knight's sword while screaming. The unique golden sword of the imperial knights flashed. However, Tawuk. The results were the same as before. A sword cut in half and fell onto the carpet. Now Astana couldn't say anything. He breathed and stared blankly at the sword that had been cut off. How? Then, Perez's sword moved smoothly. It was a smooth motion as if water was flowing. If you don't want to die, I told you to step back. Hyung. Along with the low resonant sound, blue light fluttered through Perez's sword. Oh, come on. Everyone was astonished to recognize the true identity of the blue light. At the age of 13, no one had ever emitted an aura. The vivid blue color. Hey, that's ridiculous. Astana was rubbing his eyes now. How could you? Like Astana, like Belsac. For you can't get rid of that, you thing. Even after seeing his sword cut like tofu twice, and you still can't believe it. Cancel it. The tip of Perez's sword with a blue aura swaying towards Astana. I said blood cancel it. It was different from Astana's sword, which constantly shaking. Perez's sword, without even a bit of shaking, was threatening to stab Astana at any moment. I'll apologize to you. Not me. Perez said, pushing the sword further into Astana's neck. Ha! Me. Naturally, I thought he was referring to me, which is said to be half-blood. I looked at Perez in surprise. Perez's red eyes sunk darkly. His sharp eyes, as sharp as a sword blade, glared at Astana. He was really angry at Astana, who called me a half-blood. Stop. It was the Emperor. Let the sword down. But Perez was still aiming at Astana. It looked like he had no intention of lowering his sword. I stabbed Perez in the side that no one else could see. If he disobeys the Emperor's words and gets blacklisted, it will be a headache. Fortunately, Perez slowly lowered his sword. Then Astana suddenly shouted. It must be magic. Pointing to Perez with his finger, he said as if he was angry with the Emperor. Otherwise, how? Stop, Astana. Said the Emperor frowning. But your Majesty. He aimed his sword at me. To me. Didn't the first prince hit my granddaughter first? My grandfather cut off Astana's words. Well, that. The only sin of the second prince was to protect my granddaughter from the first prince who aimed the sword. One Astana looked at the Emperor hoping for help, but Jovans didn't seem to have any idea. He became the perfect bystander and just looked at the situation. Apologize. Even at the words of my grandfather, Astana was just standing energetically. My grandfather told the Emperor that there was no sign of reflection. It seems that first prince is still angry, so it would be better to cool his head alone. It would be better to do that. Jovans, who immediately agreed with my grandfather's words, glanced at the knights. Let this go. Ah. Let go of this. Astana struggled when both of his arms were pulled by the knights one by one. While looking at it, I clicked my tongue. Astana was pulled outside, and the room finally became quiet. Are you all right? Perez asked me. Yeah, it's fine. While I tried to answer without thinking, I thought about where I was now. Just as expected. The Emperor was watching us. It's okay. Thank you. After politely saying hello to Perez, I turned right away. However, the Emperor's strange gaze does not fall from me. It bothers me why he keeps doing that. I pretended to be as fine as possible and walked away with an expressionless face. Tia. Are there any injuries? My father stepped over and knelt on one knee, lowered himself and hugged me tightly, and asked. You are not hurt. Oh, by the way. He looked down on a dress that was torn by Astana. Oh. My Tia's elaborate dress is torn. That stupid thing. The silk, which I thought was only torn a little, was torn very badly and couldn't be repaired. I should have been whispering to Perez to stab him earlier. 3 If I did, he would have stabbed Astana without any hesitation. I thought that somehow. I apologize for Astana's rudeness instead. For some reason Emperor Jovan said. And Perez. Yes, Your Majesty. Well done. If you're a man, you should know how to stand up for a woman. Perez probably couldn't find a word to answer. He just looked at me for a while and then nodded slightly. But I was also surprised. I don't think you would run right away like that. Jovans looked at Perez interestingly. It must have been because the first prince dared to pull the sword in front of His Majesty. Grandpa stopped the conversation sensibly. My grandfather was the only one who knew that I and Perez know each other and that we had been in close friendship for a long time. Is that so? The Emperor had now returned to his usual easy-going face as if he had forgotten Astana. It was completely different from my father, who has still hugged me and was anxious. But this is the first time that Perez showed such an appearance. Don't put too much meaning, Your Majesty. Yes, that's wonderful. How does it look, Gallahan? My father, who had been patting me on the back, stopped. What do you mean, Your Majesty? Since your daughter and Perez are the same age, why don't you let her befriend? Looking at their personality, the two seemed to get along quite well, to know, which part. Point 1 I was dumbfounded. It seemed the same for both my grandfather and father. Perez was the only one whose eyes were glistened at the Emperor's words. Point 2, it would be nice to wake up today. My grandfather said with a stiff complexion. Her lips were twitching in exasperation. Let's go, Gallahan. Yes, father. My father also answered and raised the body that knelt on one knee. Beetle. My father's body shook. Dad. I held my father's hand leaning to one side. Gallahan. Why? Oh, no. Maybe one leg is numb. Gallahan. My grandfather shouted out loud. However, my father's body began to fall to one side again. Point 13 Poop, thump. Point 1 A loud and heavy sound rang on the floor. My father also sat on the floor and looked puzzled because he didn't understand the situation. What's going on? Grandfather asked. I do not know. Why is the right leg like this? My father's hand stretched and rubbed his right leg. Is it better to call a doctor? Jovans also approached and asked insignificantly. While everyone was confused without knowing the situation, I gritted my teeth. It finally started. Point 10 A disease in which one side of the body gradually does not listen and spreads rapidly, and eventually the body loses the ability to exercise. Eventually, the paralysis reaches the chest, so the sufferer cannot open his eyes and breathe, and then dies of pain. Plenbrew, which killed my father, started to catch on. Chapter 62 You are listening at novelfull.audio. We rode straight back to the Lombardy mansion. Emperor Jovans offered to call a doctor right away, but my father refused. In the carriage on the way home, my father laughed and said with a confused face that he was fine to me. We can't let the royal family know about Lombardy's internal affairs. Even though he had something wrong with his body right now, he was worried about the family affairs. Fortunately, my grandfather sent people to the mansion in advance, so the preparation was quick. When we arrived, the attendants were waiting with stretchers. However, they don't know why, and when they opened the carriage and saw my father lying halfway down, their complexions were all hardened. I'm sorry. Dad lay on a stretcher and laughed. Don't talk. Grandpa said in a low voice to my father. The bedroom was already fully prepared for my father. When we opened the door to our residence, Claravan and Lural waited with stiff faces. You still here, Mr. Claravan? Is that important now? For several years, even while doing business, my father and Claravan always talked respectfully with each other. How about the doctor? The grandfather asked the butler. I contacted Dr. O'Malley. Everything was happening so fast. My father lying in bed and rubbing his right leg, and my grandfather sitting next to him. And people come together to help us. I was impatient to accept this situation. But no one knew why my father fell. Except me. Among those who are busy moving, I struggled to manage my facial expressions. For my father, who doesn't know what his illness yet, I made a serious face. However, my efforts seemed meaningless in front of my father. Tia. My father called me. The bedroom became quiet. People who were busy momentarily stopped and looked at me. Probably everyone was forgetting my existence. Dad is fine, said my father. I know. I replied, hiding my heart agitation as much as possible. Yes, because our Tia is smart. I couldn't laugh at him even though I saw a friendly smile. You don't have to be scared. I couldn't answer. I'm scared. The disease my father has is a terrible disease. And that disease took my father away from me in the last life. It seemed like that word would come through my lips. Instead of saying something else, I bowed my head. Be nov calm, Tia. My father was surprised at my reaction and opened his eyes wide. Oh, it should be a little more relaxed. However, since the image of my father lying in bed has remained in my memory, it seems so overlapped with the image in the hospital bed right now. It was best not to bite my lower lip. Did my dad think my condition was unusual? Even with an uncomfortable body, he woke up from bed and tried to approach me. Dr. O'Malley is here. Fortunately, Dr. O'Malley arrived with a butler's voice and carrying a visiting bag. Leave the room for a moment, Grandpa said to the people. Soon after, only my father and me, my grandfather, and Dr. O'Malley were left in the room. What are your symptoms? Once the right leg. Father calmly explained his condition. I knew even if I didn't listen. No, I knew what was going on in the future. The numbness that starts with the right leg will get worse and worse over a week. Dr. O'Malley does his best to prescribe the drug, but it doesn't work that much. At best, it only reduces the discomfort from paralysis. And in a month, the other leg will begin to paralyze. Another month, the range of motion of the right arm sharply narrowed. Another month. He can't use his right hand at all, and my dad, who couldn't move his neck the week before my birthday, had difficulty breathing. That was the time when I prayed and begged all night for my father to die quickly because I couldn't bear to see my father in pain. For 3 days before my birthday, my father took his last breath and closed his eyes. One unstoppable memories flooded in. Florentia, come here. My grandfather motioned to approach the bed so that I wouldn't feel like I was alone. But I shook my head. Then I sat on a chair in the corner of the bedroom, away from the bed. Have you ever fallen or injured your back? It's never been like that. If so. Dr. O'Malley examined my father very carefully. Can you move your toes? My father looked at his toe and focused his nerves, but his right foot didn't even move. Strange. My father seemed embarrassed, frowned, and tried several times, but it didn't work. It was strange that the leg, which had been fine until this morning, suddenly did not listen as if it was someone else's. That was the fear of a disease called Trenbrew. It appears suddenly without any signs or symptoms. It is not a genetic disease. No one knows how the disease develops. The same was the case in my previous life. Even Esther made medicine to eliminate the symptoms of paralysis. Not that she had discovered the cause of Trenbrew's disease. Do you have any pain in your legs? Pain? No. I would rather have it if it hurts. It feels like my legs suddenly disappeared. Dr. O'Malley's face was getting worse. That's right. These are unusual symptoms. It does spend time with words, but Dr. O'Malley probably already knew. My father's sudden and weird symptoms indicate that there is only one disease, Trenbrew's disease. From Dr. O'Malley's, who spoke less and less, my father seemed to feel something. He looked at me with dark eyes and said to me, who's sitting quietly in the corner. Tia, will you be out for a while? Yeah. I quietly came out of the room and closed the door. I didn't even try to overhear the conversation going back and forth inside. I already know what to say. Mississippi. Laurel and Claravan, who were waiting outside the door, looked at me and got up from their seats. Do not worry too much. Gallahan.Nim will be fine. Laurel hugged me with warm arms, but it was useless as if I had frozen inside. Will you bring me a cup of hot milk? I asked Laurel. Yes, young Mississippi. Please wait. Laurel was delighted that I wanted to drink something, and quickly headed to the kitchen. Now, only me and Claravan were left in the parlor. Claravan didn't try to comfort me. It seemed to me that he knew that there was something outrageous about my attitude. Claravan. Yes, Mississippi Florentia. I think I'll have to send a letter for far away. Recognize someone who has fast feet and is trustworthy. I held the pen on the notepad on the living room table. I didn't worry about what to say. Knowing that today would come, my hand holding the pen could not shake. A short letter, scribbled down quickly, was handed out to Claravan. You can send it like this. This. Since the paper was not folded, Claravan could see all the contents of the letter. Claravan's blue eyes shook. Where to send the letter? Screet. The door of my father's room opened and Dr. O'Malley came out. The doctor did not look at me. No, I was wondering if he would look me in the eye, but he harshly passed by. Okay. It must have been difficult to see the young daughter just knowing that her father was dying. I sighed a little. Tia, will you come in here? Then I heard my father's voice calling me. Claravan quietly followed me on my way to the bedroom. My father was sitting on the bed just as he was before. Dr. O'Malley told me what was wrong, Tia. My father said to me with a smile. I was just surprised by my leg muscles for a moment, but he said I would get better soon. What? I doubted my ears. And my heart pounded. Maybe the future has changed. Is it really Trenbrou's disease? And I looked at my grandfather. Ah. Grandpa wasn't looking at me. Like Dr. O'Malley, he avoided my gaze. Dad will be okay soon. My father spoke to me in a lively voice. Don't worry too much, Tia. 6. I couldn't say anything. It seemed that my throat was choked by swallowing a large rock. Even at this moment when he learned that he had a disease that didn't have a cure. My father was thinking more about me, plus his daughter, who is only 10 years old, is worried about him. I'm afraid it will be scary. With a young face, and such a bright smile. I gritted my teeth and looked at my father, then turned around. And I said to Claravan. The letter is to the Imperial Academy, the recipient is me and my father's only hope. The recipient is Estra, please. Chapter 63. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Florentia did not come near Galahad's side. She stood far away from the door, talked for a while with Claravan, and then went back. At that appearance, Galahad smiled bitterly and said to Lurel. Lurel, can you help Tia get ready for bed? Yes, Galahad.nim. Lurel bowed her head, then ran toward Florentia. The only one left in the room with Galahad was Lulak, who was still sitting in a chair, and Claravan standing at the door. I think I'll have to borrow Lurel's hand in the future. That's a big deal. There will be more and more things he cannot do in the future. Now it's just one leg, but he doesn't know when the symptoms of paralysis will spread to other places. Half a year. It was his remaining life, as Dr. O'Malley told him. After Trenbrou outbreaks, it is said that usually the sufferer dies within half a year. I'll bring another doctor, so I'll see you again. Father. It's a very rare case, so how do we know after being checked just once? Ask another doctor. You have Trenbrou's disease. That doesn't make sense. Claravan's face hardened at Lulak's muttering. Trenbrou. That the doctor said. Eventually, Lulak screamed. His messy face doesn't look like Lulak's usually quiet and calm expression. Galahad could not have suffered from such a severe disease. Father. Galahad looked at him and nodded and said. I'll see another doctor. Yes, you should. Dr. O'Malley seems to be rusty. Lulak stood up from his seat. Maybe your leg will be fine tomorrow. But even though he said so, Lulak's gaze pointed at Galahad's stiffened leg. It looks so fine on the outside. You are still too young, Galahad. It doesn't make sense to have to suffer from a disease without medicine. 4 Lulak turned away, after leaving such a statement. And don't let this thing leak around. You broke your leg by stumbling at the Imperial banquet. Okay. Thank you, Father. Galahad, who is showing fame both within and outside of the family, recently had an incredible wave of rumors that something was wrong with his condition. This will be great news that will never be again for a competitor looking for its weaknesses, and it will be a big stumbling block for those who wish to work with the Gallahan clothing store. I don't know when someone will come, so put a splint on that leg. Haha. Yes, father. Gallahan laughed, and Lulak left the room after telling the boy that it's nothing. At the same time as the sound of the door closing, a smile disappeared from Gallahan's face. Then he said to Claravan with his calmly sunken voice. Claravan.nim. Yes, tell me. I think I need to prepare a few things. What are you talking about? Gallahan sighed in response to Claravan's question. I have to be prepared if it really is Tlenbru's disease. It was a sigh that was more of a kind of resignation rather than frustration. Are you going to leave Tia alone? To Gallahan's smiling face, Claravan could not say anything. Instead, he squeezed his fist so that the note that Florentia had written and handed over made a crackling sound. Asterisk 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 this morning comes brightly. Perez has a habit for a long time, that is headed to the Poirak Palace Training Center with his sword. From the day when he first met Florentia. It was the morning training he hadn't missed since being told he had to practice swordsmanship. Yesterday's banquet ended after midnight, and he's only been resting a few hours. But there are no exceptions. His body felt heavy, but when he started operating aura, the feeling quickly disappeared. Perez, who was sweating, sat on the training ground and recalled what had happened last night. Florentia, who first met in the forest and caught Perez's attention, that time had passed quickly, but she did not change. Still, Perez only saw Florentia. Even when she first walks into the banquet hall. Even for the sweet time on the terrace that passed so quickly. Even when Astana drew his sword. It was only Florentia that Perez was seeing. And when Gallahan falls and everyone is looking at Gallahan. Perez always looking at Florentia. Is she okay? Unlike him, Florentia seemed to be very close to her father. Looking at Gallahan, who couldn't get up while lying down, the face that had closed her lips came to his mind. It would be nice if I could go and see her. However, there was a word from Florentia, that no one should know the closeness of Perez and Florentia. Perez squeezed her own heart when he put his sword in the scabbard. But, Perez misses her. 3 Perez's shoulders while returning to the palace were struck down again and again. Tuesday, Her Majesty the Empress won. It was just when he got to the Poirak Palace. Perez raised his head at Caitlin's low voice. Then, he saw the Empress walking out of the carriage door on her own. An Empress' right hand, which went up sharply ready to slap Perez's face. It was slow enough for Perez to think. Will I get hit? That thought crossed Perez's mind. It was because he could predict why Empress would slap him in the face. Perez, standing still, turned slightly at the last minute. The Empress's hand narrowly missed Perez's face. How dare you? Empress becomes even more annoyed. You lowly. How dare you put your sword at my son? Rabini tried to hit Perez again, but each time Perez avoided it with a slight move, it's raising more anger. Catch that lowly thing. Eventually, the Empress ordered the knights who accompanied Head. However, the knights who were approaching also flinched to see the sword tied to Perez's waist. The fact that the second prince was already a talented person in creating aura was spread throughout the imperial palace. It is also a vivid blue aura. Although he was still young, it was evident that he already had the same skills as the knights. Just as expected. The second prince had already stepped back 2.5 steps as if he had already figured out their next move. Even if the knights pulled out the sword, it was a distance that the tip of the sword could not reach. All of them had already been figured out. While the knights lingered, the Empress poured out all sorts of swearing toward Perez. I should have killed you at that time. I should have buried you with your lowly mother. This disgusting thing knows your roots. Dare to touch my son. What do you mean of knows your roots, Empress? The empress's footsteps stopped. It was the emperor who came out because of the fuss while waiting for Perez in the gardens of Poirac Palace. The knights who approached Perez quickly stepped back. Are you saying that it is inappropriate for a prince to be my son? Or? The emperor said without hiding his displeasure. The root that the empress says, it's me. I don't mean that. Rubini was embarrassed for a moment, but soon returned to her composure and answered. Point 2. She was even very confident when she spoke with her chin slightly raised. I heard what happened to Astana yesterday. Why didn't you tell me? What am I supposed to say? My 14-year-old son pushed Galahad's daughter for no reason and tried to hurt her in the presence of Lombardy. Jovans was sarcastic. Astana must have had a reason for that too. Rubini, angry, shouted in a hoarse voice. But the emperor frowned and shook his head. As the prince of this empire, he should have known how to make the Lombardy family on his side. Those words eventually made Rubini's anger pop and burst. Why? Why do you always seek Lombardy's attention? The lord of this empire is His Majesty. The Dorelli family. So. In the same situation as yesterday, you should be sided with Astana. You should have punished the Lombardy girl who made Astana so angry, instead of letting that lowly servant's son point his sword at Astana. The emperor asked, clicked his tongue with a completely tired face. You want me to pretend to play with Lombardy and throw them away just because of Astana? How can you just rely only on Lombardy when you have so many nobles? If Lombardy neglects the imperial family, Anginas will try to take the place. Well, that's. Push Lombardy out and fill the spot with Anginas. How far do you want me to be a stupid emperor? Jovan smirked. Empress. Emperor's voice called Rubini was so piercing. Anginas can never replace Lombardy. You can't do that. So don't be too greedy. 15. The empress trembled, but the emperor did not care. It wasn't just on the surface. Lombardy was like a giant pillar of maintaining this empire and the imperial family. In his youth, it was very difficult to admit it, but Jovans became wise. I have used Lombardy, as Lolac said, accepting that clashing with them can destroy everything. Sometimes empowering them, sometimes pretending to push them out. However, there was something that even Lolac, who had a quick count like a fox, never tolerated. It was a matter about his own blood and flesh. If Perez didn't get in the way yesterday, Jovans would have to publicly reprimand Astana to relieve Lolac's anger. However, the reason Perez ran out with a sword to protect Florentia was still unknown to Jovans. That's why he visits Poirac Palace to ask about that today. However, it seems that the empress also come. Thinking that Astana will tell his mother, makes the emperor angry. Bad boy. Then Perez, standing still to one side, appeared. While entering the banquet hall, the emperor remembered that Perez couldn't take his eyes off Galahad's daughter. And suddenly a strange impulse arose. Jovans told Perez, standing against the empress. You should visit Galahad Lombardy in the hospital instead of me. Perez's sour face turned bright. 1. And send my letter on the way to the Lord of Lombardy. It says that Galahad's daughter will be your playmate. 1. 2 underscore 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 glossary. 1. Same as Astana and Belsac relationship. It seems better to use playmate than your person. Chapter 64. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Who is coming? I closed the book I was reading and looked at Lurel. The second prince's majesty is visiting the Lombardy mansion. A little while ago, the second prince went from imperial palace. I doubted my ears. Perez is coming to Lombardy. Was it possible for him to go outside as he wants? Of course, he wasn't in a situation where he had to live like before, but it took many times to get around the castle and get around freely. But is he going to leave the Emperor's territory, the Poirac Palace, and come to Lombardy? This would be a good chance to be attacked by someone on the street. Today. Yes. They say they arrive around noon. Ha! Is Perez stupid? There is no reason for him to come to Lombardy. Why? I do not know. Laurel shrugged and whispered. By the way, young lady. Did you know Your Majesty the Second Prince? Oh, and it turns out that Laurel doesn't know. A few moments ago. It's only temporary, I just exchanged letters. Ah. Maybe, that. Instead of answering, she nodded. Just as expected. A strange smile appeared on Laurel's face. Oh my goodness. Then, Your Majesty, the Second Prince is coming to see our young Mississippi. Sigh. It was also clear that she had a strange imagination. It's not like that. There must be something else. But when the servant of the Imperial Palace called me, didn't that mean he came to see young Mississippi? That, well, was there only Laurel in that place? Well, no. It was me and the butler. The butler oversees the mansion but usually takes care of my grandfather's surroundings. If so, it means he is coming to see me and my grandfather. However, there was no reason to guess. Especially in this situation where he and I are pretending to not know each other. Well, we'll know when Perez comes. Anyway, he was coming here, and it was something I couldn't prevent. And since the servant of the Imperial Palace visited the mansion in the morning, everyone would know that Perez was coming. I kept reading, ignoring Laurel, who kept looking at me with emoji-like eyes laughing. It was a book containing information and examples of treatment for various rare diseases such as Tlenbro. Time quickly passed and it was noon when the sun set in the middle of the sky. From a distance, I could see the imperial carriage Perez was riding. However, the imperial knights were with him behind, and the huge imperial banner was attached. It meant a very formal visit. My grandfather sent me a letter telling me to take him to the office after lunch with Perez because he promised beforehand. But I wasn't alone in front of the mansion. Shaunanet.nim, V's.nim, and Laurels.nim. They all sent their family's attendants, one Laurel whispers in my ear. That was right. It seemed like everyone was sending people to check the situation. It was not the first prince who came, but the second prince who came to visit Lombardy and called me. I could tell just by seeing the eyes of the attendants staying on me. Dagdak, dagdak. Finally, the horse stopped and the door of the carriage opened. Even today, Perez, whose face is almost expressionless, walked toward us. But I could tell by seeing Perez's eyes shining brightly. That guy, he's very excited right now. 4 Before Perez made a mistake, I immediately bent my knees and was a little polite. Hello, His Majesty the Second Prince. Welcome. I was waiting. Ah. Hello, Lombardy young Mississippi. Perez looked around for a moment and then followed my play. Unfortunately, my grandfather has an appointment, so I will take you to my father's residence. We have lunch together and go to Grandpa's office after lunch. Yeah. It is a success. I succeeded in saying hello awkwardly like people with bare acquaintances. The relentless gazes of the servants who had been given the task continued until we left the mansion hall and entered the pavilion. Even though the head waiter was very attentive, now we were far away. I was able to relax only when I entered our house through the long corridor. Fortunately, the knights accompanying Perez stood guard outside the front door. I asked when I sat down on the sofa in the living room. Woo! Why are you here, Perez? I want to see you, Tia. Do not play. Really? As Perez and I started chatting, Laurel's eyes widened. Mississippi. Why? You are more close than I think. You too. Laurel. When Perez called her name, Laurel was surprised to the point of jumping. My, how do you know my name? Because Tia mentioned you a few times in a letter. Oh, yes. I see. Laurel looked at me and blushed brightly. Don't talk to me. Why are you here today? Ah, young Mississippi. Laurel looked at me in amazement at my sharp voice. In fact, I was a little embarrassed too. It wasn't something that would be very annoying. My nerves seemed to be much more sensitive than usual because of my father's condition. I came to convey this. Perez pulled out a letter envelope from his arms with a calm face. It can be recognized even from the outward appearance of applying the melted gold wax. Now, wait. Is this your Majesty's letter? Yes, just, yes. I am well aware of Perez's personality, in which he is out of focus. The Emperor's letters are different from those written by ordinary people. If the Emperor officially asks someone to deliver a letter, that person has a heavy responsibility to deliver the letter to the person whose name is written on the envelope as soon as possible. This is common sense that any imperial citizen knows. Perez was just staring at me and Laurel in embarrassment. I hurriedly looked at the envelope. Lulac Lombardy. I'll send someone to the office. Laurel said, and holding the skirt of her dress in one hand so that she could run. A moment. I raised one hand and stopped Laurel. Perez, do you know what's right in this letter? It's about to make you as my person. Perez did not hesitate to release the contents of the Emperor's letter. I grabbed my head inside. Ugh, headache. Being a proponent of a prince is nothing but an official statement that his family or children will support him in fighting for the throne. I could tell just by looking at Astana and Belsac. After announcing that he was the first prince playmate, many people gathered around Vise. Since Vise, known as the next heir of Lombardy, is supporting the first prince, the stock price of Anginas is also rising day by day. Are you in trouble? Perez asked me. Well, it's not that good. Astana, or the Empress, has been completely wrong with this incident. Because the battle between Astana and Perez was not without reason, it was because of Astana's sword that was pointed at me. In addition, the fact that Perez could use aura spread widely. At the same time, the fact that the second prince officially appeared in the national founding banquet, and at the same time, the fact that Perez, who is only 13 years old, could use aura, caused rumors that a genius had been born. However, it was a different matter to become a person of Perez that completely having a bad relationship with Astana. To be precise, my father, the third son of Lombardy Lord, declares his support for Perez. This could have a huge impact on my father's business. It was when I was in trouble. Perez and my eyes met. His slightly frowned eyes stared at me and asked a question. So, are you saying that being my person could hurt you? I nodded a little and tried to explain to him why. Then. What are you doing? Skeek. Perez tore the Emperor's letter in half. One looks like he's crazy. But Perez said firmly. I don't need it if it's bothering you. No matter what it is. Still, it's the Emperor's letter. I take the half-torn letter into my hand and stare at it blankly. My thoughts were short. Perez said embarrassedly. I thought it would be good to act immediately. Hey. Are you mad? When I thought about it, I felt bad. I asked carefully, but Perez shook his head. No, I mean it. Forget this letter. I'll take care of it. What are you gonna do? Perez, if you don't get the Emperor's attention, big trouble will ensue. No. I have to stick it well and take it to my grandfather. Because the recipient of the letter was my grandfather. What letter are you talking about? Dad. My father stood leaning against the open frame of the bedroom door. Gallahan Lombardy. Nim. Perez quickly greeted my father. What letter are you talking about, Prince? Perez looks at me for a moment and then handed out the emperor's letter that was torn in half. Well. My father pondered and asked what to do with these children. Let's hear it. It's a letter saying that I will make Tia as a person for the prince. Yes, that's right. Your Majesty eventually. My father seemed to have guessed that this might happen. Was there a saying between adults? Father looked at Perez with strange eyes for a moment. Unlike my father usually, he had such a scary face that he was neither friendly nor kind. Perez's shoulder, who met my father's gaze, flinched a little and saw a lot of strength going into it. The two didn't move as if they were having a snowball fight. There. It was when I brought it up, which was worse. The father, who was leaning against the door and standing hard, took something out of the back of the door with a KKK. It was crutches that Dr. O'Malley left this morning. The Emperor's letter should be delivered immediately. I'll go to my father's office. I will go. Dad legs. I can still walk. Dad smiled and said firmly. I can walk on crutches. My father should help me with my daughter's work. The appearance of my father walking step by step on crutches come to my mind. It was the same when walking in the hallway, but even more worse when going down the stairs. I and Laurel offered to help, but my father refused. I can do it alone. He was stubborn enough so my grandfather's appearance could be seen in my father. But at the same time, on his way to the office, his back looked so big as if he wasn't afraid of anything. Chapter 65. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Well. Gallahan. What are you doing here? Lulak paused the meeting and returned to the office. It was because the message from the second prince, whom he decided to meet after lunch, came in haste. However, it wasn't just Florentia and the second prince that waiting for Lulak in the office. Gallahan, who wore crutches, was also with them. The second prince said that His Majesty had something to give to my father, so I came in a hurry. To me. Lulak looked at Perez. Since he was Perez's guardian, he would occasionally observe Poirak Palace to see how he was doing. But Lulak didn't get used to Perez's eyes. Likewise, today, when his eyes met those of the second prince, he was hiding discomfort. Your Majesty told me to convey the message. Perez held out a gold envelope with a short word. I don't think it was like this from the beginning. Sorry. Perez gave a deep bow to Lulak. Lulak looked displeased with Perez, then pulled out a two-piece letter and read it. Shortly, a low voice came out of Lulak. Yovans. It felt like he would run to the imperial palace with the piece of the letter right now. Lulak's eyes sparkled with anger. Vise and Belsac are the pawns they get because they beg. This was a situation where Emperor Yovans asked Florentia on the pretext of using his son as an excuse. Grandfather. Lulak opened his eyes and looked at his surprised granddaughter. The innocent and beautiful face was filled with surprise. How dare you want to take over my granddaughter? It was said that the same gender could be a close friend, but the opposite gender was different. 2 Since ancient times, the imperial family often matched a marriage this way. This is a method often used before reaching the legal marriage proposal age. Yovans couldn't possibly not understand it. Of course, it is not a formal marriage proposal, and this does not determine Florentia's future. Because she's the granddaughter of Lulak Lombardy. But feeling bad is a different matter. Don't worry, Gallahan. I will take care of this on my own. He was thinking of going to the imperial palace tomorrow and throwing these two-piece letters in front of the emperor. I will accept it. What? Lulak was surprised at Gallahan's words. I will accept your Majesty's proposal. I will make Tia as His Majesty the second prince's person. It was a bad decision. Lulak shook his head and tried to explain. But Gallahan. I know how far this can cause a matter, father. Then why? However, Lulak shut his mouth. I was examined again yesterday by the doctor who was called by father who came late yesterday. At first glance, Lulak's heart broke at Gallahan's calm words. He said that the doctor also diagnosed Tlenbrug's disease. The sky was trying to take his son early. Lulak, who had been sorrowed and silent, suddenly looked at Florentia. The granddaughter was bowing her head. Perhaps this smart kid already knew that her father's leg wasn't just broken. A son who can't tell his daughter that he is dying, and a granddaughter who pretends to be unaware of her father's condition. 2 Lulak's heart seemed to tremble. Gallahan continued to speak in a calm voice. At one point, I thought when there was a storm, I could just lower myself and wait for the storm to pass, father. But now I know that's not the way to survive. Lulak read what Gallahan was trying to say, and nodded gloomily. No matter how much Lulak trying to help, he couldn't even be involved in what happened after his death. So I will fight the storm and try to protect Tia. If I can't, I'd like to give Tia whatever it is, something that can support Tia, father, for Lulak gritted his teeth at the sight of his son preparing for his death and his daughter's future. Lulak smashed his fists and clenched them in order not to curse the sky right away. Then he said in a very tired voice somewhere. Yeah. I know. If you are willing, then do it. Yes, father. And isn't it just a matter? Yeah. It is just a matter. Nothing more, nothing less. Lulak said as if to calm Gallahan. Tia, usually Dad will ask you first. But this time. I know. Do whatever Dad wants. Yeah. Thank you. Gallahan's big hand stroked her daughter's soft brown hair. Lulak looked at Perez with a sigh at that appearance. The second prince. Yes. You know that the second prince and the first prince are very different. Perez nodded. The first prince has a strong mother. Besides, his mother is the empress. The empress and Astana are safe unless they commit a crime equivalent to rebellion right away. But Perez was different. Lombardy's house is playing the role of guardian, but that was only through an agreement with the emperor. Even if he only made a few mistakes, it will destabilize Perez's position as second prince. Lulak, of course, wasn't worried about Perez. He wondered if this would adversely affect his granddaughter, Florentia, in any way. I think you know what I mean. I know. Lulak still didn't like Perez, but he had no intention of opposing Gallahan if he wanted it. There was only one question. But why is the letter torn? It was because I found out that being my person was difficult for Florentia. You tore up your Majesty's letter for just one reason. One reason is enough, for Lulak said nothing for a moment, then swallowed hard. I like that one. 7 Then he glanced at Perez for the last time and turned around. I paused the meeting and came out, so I have to go back. The second prince has come to my house, so take a rest and return. I will send a separate reply to the letter, and Gallahan. Yes, father. You go back and rest, right now. Yes. After leaving the office again, Lulak headed to the conference room where people were waiting. Then he suddenly stopped and called the butler, who was following from behind. Ask the name of the famous doctor in the empire and bring here. Don't let anyone know, be careful. Lulak hasn't given up on Gallahan yet. 1 Even if Tlenbrug's disease was correct, he was thinking of creating a cure for the disease at whatever cost. 3 Money is what I use when I need it. 2 Lulak went back to the conference room, taking care of his weakening heart. V's was walking through the hallway. Normally, he would have contacted Dr. O'Malley to come to his residence, but now he couldn't wait. A while ago, he was on his way, and see the second prince and Gallahan heading to the Lord's office. He wandered for a while because he hadn't been there before, but he was able to find the doctor's lab quickly. Bang! The door opened with a loud noise, and Dr. O'Malley, surprised, jumped in one step. How did you come here? If you send someone, I'll go. Gallahan, what disease does he have? Yes, What? What do you mean by that? Don't think about lying to me. I know that Gallahan didn't break his leg. These words were a half-bluff. He knew and already knew that there was a commotion in the back seat of the National Founding Banquet. However, the content of the disturbance that he heard through people was only a matter of the two princes pointing their swords at each other, and not Gallahan broke his leg. However, Gallahan returned to the mansion earlier than planned, and after that, he was already in recuperation for several days. Despite spreading rumors of a broken leg, Vees was suspicious. Dr. O'Malley was not able to answer right away and was restless. Vees whispered politely to calm the doctor. Hey, Dr. O'Malley. Did you already know everything? I am asking if I can help my younger brother as an older brother. The doctor hesitated for a moment but was immediately deceived. Even if you know the name of the disease, there won't be much you can do to help. What do you mean? What disease did Gallahan have? Trenbrew disease. All of Vees' movements stopped. Trenbrew. Isn't that a deadly disease? His voice was shaking softly. O'Malley closed his eyes as if he were back in the day he gave Lords and Gallahan the name of the illness. No matter how badly the relationship is, even if it's Vees, it must be a big heartache because his younger brother has a deadly disease. The doctor understood that way. Ha ha. One Vees started to laugh. For a long time, Vees smiled with a smile on his face and shouted. The sky gives me a chance. 16. It seemed like a decade of congestion had eased. Pure joy flows with every laugh. Dr. O'Malley couldn't find any figure of a person who would soon lose his younger brother in a terrible illness. Thank you, Gallahan. Thanks. 24. Vees laughed for a long time, not knowing that Dr. O'Malley was looking at him with a tired face. *****2 After leaving my grandfather's office and separate from my father, I and Perez headed to the garden on the side of the annex. Luro went home with my father to help him. When I reached the place where the fountain flows quietly, I turned to Perez. Why are you like this? Yes, you. Why are you so gloomy and speechless, and you look at me? Perez, like a person walking on a thin sheet of ice, is very careful even with his footsteps. And I was worried about it. Because Tia, you seem to be thinking of something. And about your father's condition. Perez was caring for me. It was so funny that I was annoyed at the moment. A child who is only 13 years old looks at how I feel, and I get angry. I sighed and said. Don't worry about my dad. Of course, he got a bit of a bad disease. But he will get well soon. Do you know the name of the disease? Perez asked carefully. Trenbrew. Perez tried to look as cool as possible but failed. First of all, it was a little bit worrisome to look at me with a dog-like face. But I pretended to have both hands on my back and said. Someone who made the cure for Trenbrew's disease is coming. Of course, with the cure. Chapter 66. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Is there a cure? Of course. I replied, recalling Estra, who is now on his way to Lombardy. I can't stop my father's outbreak, but I can stop the death. I tried to calm my mixed mind like in muddy water. It was difficult for me to see my father get sick again, even though I already knew it and was predicted. But this time is different. It's different from the past when I was helpless, unable to do anything, and only watched my father suffer. I am constantly talking and reading by myself, but I don't think stress is the only one. Your complexion is not good, Tia. Perez stepped up and said. Are you okay? I stepped back. Perez looked down at the room where I backed off and frowned. It seemed like he was worried about me for a while, then he rummaged in his pocket and took out something. Chocolate cookies. One, it was a thick cookie with a large chunk of chocolate embedded in it. In difficult time. Something that can help. All I know is this. Ah. Okay, thank you. I accepted it once. It's also quite heavy. When I just hold the cookies, Perez looked at me. Do you want me to eat it? I slowly put the cookie in my mouth. I can see the anticipation on Perez's face. When I put a little bit in my mouth and bite it, the sweet taste spread in my mouth with a crunchy sound. Delicious. It wasn't what I said for Perez, it was really delicious. Really. Delicious. Thank God. Perez smiled so deeply that dimples formed on his cheeks. I don't know if this is true. Did you make this, Perez? Are you good at cooking too? Not enough in appearance, study, and swordsmanship, even cooking. Point for heaven, which gives one person different kinds of talents, it's unfair. Next time, I will make more. Said Perez, who blushed a little. Next time. Well, yes. I answered without thinking. First of all, it was a delicious cookie. Perez's smile grew even deeper at my words. After that, I forgot the cookie in my hand for a moment and looked at Perez's face with an empty look. It was a handsome face, though still expressionless, but with a shy smile. His beauty grew even stronger. Also, I wondered if his good looks would improve as he got older and really entered the phase of a young boy. It was darker and more dazzling than the rose in full bloom where we had just stood. I completely forgot that at one point he appeared and took control of the empire in such a short time. Tia. When he saw me half silent, Perez tilted his head and called my name. The fine black hair that flickers with those small movements is another art. I patted his head with a proud heart that expects Perez's brilliant future. I just wandering it, Perez. Your beauty is a national treasure. Of course, you shouldn't hurt your face when you're training. Your pretty face is everyone's public good. No, not this. You have to cherish it anyway. 3. Is that so? Perez touched his face once and said as if he wasn't sure. Oh, he's a young boy who doesn't even know he's handsome. Tia, you're prettier than me. Are you kidding me right now? No. I mean it. Unavoidably, Perez's hand reached my cheek. Point 2. In an instant, the distance between us narrowed. Eyes redder than roses came out right in front of me and looked at me. What is this? I just stiffened. And he said in a quiet voice as if telling a secret story. Pretty. That. I'm so embarrassed that I can't even say anything. When I speechless and acted like a fool. Crumbling. A small, round garden tree shook a little. I thought it was one of the little animals living in the garden. Who is it? Shrink. Perez drew a long sword and cut the garden tree at once. Tuck. The cut garden tree rolled to the side, and what could be seen behind it were 3 people sitting. Well, what is this? It was Belsac who saw the tree cut down, screaming. Ah! And there was Astalio and his 7-year-old brother Crean that were scared and unable to scream. Point 1. Now, what if you cut us by mistake? So why were you listening to other people's conversations like a rat? I asked coldly. Rat, you say? Belsac shouted, then jumped from where he was crouching. Like Perez when he was 13 years old, Belsac's height has grown a lot, but he has also grown up to be a boy whose grumpy face shows. You, half-blood. Shut up, Belsac. I immediately stopped him from trying to say another tedious swear. Because I'm not in the mood to hear you swearing with half-blood right now. If you want to say things like that, go away. Firstly, because of the problem with my father's condition, I don't know how I would explode with anger if something like Belsac existed. This is pure advice for the sake of Belsac. But I don't know if he accepted it. Belsac gritted his teeth and widened his nostrils. You don't even have a fist. What? I clicked my tongue. Then I asked Estaliu. What the hell, why are you following a kid like that? Estaliu opens his eyes round and sees Belsacca's eyes. Even bringing your little brother. Estaliu's younger brother, Kreen, is only 7 years old and is smaller than his peers. Later in life, he studied hard, and among cousins, he had the fewest misdeeds because he was the one who was not corrupted apart from myself. He inherited the blood of his mother's family, the Ginefolk family, and looks younger thanks to his red hair and freckles full of faces. Belsac is a rotten line, so stop and look for another line. 1. I sincerely advised. I don't expect Estaliu to take my advice. But later he hit the ground. If he remembers this moment, I should have heard that at the time. He will regret it. I can't. Let us go, Perez. I hated seeing the faces of idiots, so I said to Perez and tried to get out of the garden. Hey, half-blood. The second prince is here to see you, so he's in high spirits. I stopped my foot and looked back at Belsac. Maybe it's Astana's soul twin. It's funny to brag about learning the basics of swordsmanship normally. I could have ignored it roughly, but today I felt the tension quickly. I straightened my index finger, middle finger, ring finger, and 3 fingers. First, I told you not to call me half-blood. Second, in front of second prince, how stupid are you going to be? And third, I have to deal with a guy like you, but I don't want to. It's troublesome like catching a fly. In the end, only the middle finger was raised. 6. What? Belsac struggled to understand what I was saying for a long time before failing and turning his face red. And this time, I changed the target. You two half-blood really get along well with each other, right? What did you say now? Something cut off in my head. Half. Not only are you sarcastic about me being half-blood, but you also brought Perez. I immediately took what I could see, as my instinct was telling me. Who are you to badmouth him? He is the best. Are you crazy? I don't know why this rock is in such a well-preserved lawn, but it gripping my hand is like an art. When he saw the stone in my hand, there was a feeling of fear in Belsacca's face. Shrink. Eventually, Belsac stepped back and drew his sword. But I didn't even blink. How good are you call the other half or anything. If you lose by half, then are you crumbs? What? Oh my God. Belsac. Hey, Estaliu. You pull it too. Since it seemed that only himself was the one to be harmed by, Belsac shouted at Estaliu, who was next to him. Estaliu reluctantly pulled out his sword, and Kreen, who saw it, put his hand on the wooden sword he was wearing. Stop. I said, pointing my finger at Kreen. You stay still. If you don't want to be hurt. Kreen finally burst into tears as if it was quite frightening to see me staring with a big stone in one hand. There was tension between me, Belsac, and Estaliu. They were just watching it and being wary of the stone in my hand flying away, and they are the target. How simple. I laughed at the idiots when I rolled up one corner of my mouth. And said. Cut it all off, Perez. At that moment, it seemed like the wind was blowing behind me, and Perez rushed. A blue aura flashed briefly. Took. Just as Astana suffered, 2 swords were cut off in no time and fell next to the garden tree. With a sweet little metallic sound. As if nothing had happened, Perez looked at them with his usual careless eyes. Oh, the rumors were true. Come on. They're my cousins. Belsac and Estaliu were literally out of their minds. That guys are my cousins. The name Lombardy is a waste. I looked at the pathetic figure for a moment and then grabbed Perez's hand. Come on, Perez. If we stay together any longer, we'll stupid too. Now Perez, who is much bigger than me, was gently dragged like a big puppy. Perez, looking at his hand, didn't know that his face turned red. We don't even know how faintly the remaining 3 people looked at us as we pulled away. Cool. I could only hear Crean's dreamy little voice in my ears. 8 ******. A strange carriage entered the Lombardy mansion. As if running a long way, both the horse and the coachman were very tired. The carriage headed straight to the annex, not the main gate of Lombardy. It looks like there is a designated destination. Quietly, the door of the carriage standing in front of the mansion's annex opened. She was an impressive woman with a gentle impression and calm eyes. Who? Likewise, the woman, who was sighing as if exhausted, pulled the bag she had cherished during the journey alone from the carriage. At that time, the door of the annex opened. Inside, a girl and a pair of strange men and women followed suit. Clack, clack. The girl approached her with the sound of the heels come from her luxurious leather shoes and smiled brightly at the woman. I have waited for you, Estra. 8 ____________________________________________________________________________________________________________________ Glossary. 1. Line. You know that a line, in Korean, is meant as a group, or people you follow. Chapter 67. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Mississippi, Florentia. Estra hugged me tightly. I was very surprised to receive the letter. It has been a long time since I saw Estra. Tears rolled down around her eyes, which have become more mature. So, researching Plenbre's cure. Estra muttered as if she noticed it, but when she saw the 2 brothers and sister, Claravan and Laurel, standing behind me, she quickly shut up. She was worried that a strict person would know the inside story. Greetings, Estra. I said, pointing to the people behind me. It's Claravan and Laurel. This is the first time I see you. I am Laurel Dillard. I am Estra. When Laurel, who is my maid, but with an aristocratic sense, greets her politely, Estra doesn't know what to do. Then Claravan greeted Estra. 2 It's been a while, Miss Estra. Estra also lived in Lombardy's mansion, so she was acquainted with Claravan. But that was Claravan as my teacher. Not as a person of Florentia. It's okay, you can talk comfortably in front of these 2 people. Yes. Even though she nodded, Estra still looked awkward. When I see them glanced at each other. First I led them to the guest room prepared for Estra. Well, I don't need a luxurious room like this, Mississippi. No. Estra is my guest. And I have prepared a separate lab. I was planning to arrange it near Dr. O'Malley's lab, but I just made it in the annex. It's okay. Yeah. Thank you. Estra looking unfamiliarly at the luxurious guest room. I want Estra to take care of my father until his condition gets better. Estra's eyes changed at my words and nodded firmly. From the moment I saw Estra, I kept thinking about the question I wanted to ask. So, how's your research going? We have been exchanging letters from time to time and have been aware of the approximate progress. Finally, Estra's letter contained concerns about the proportion of medicines. And after receiving my letter announcing my father's outbreak, Estra wrote that she was leaving the academy immediately. A whole week after that. I only hoped Estra was coming with the cure. Did you make the medicine? Instead of answering, Estra opened her cherished bag and rummaged inside. With clenched fists, I felt that the waiting time was endless. Here you go, Mississippi. Estra was holding a dark green liquid in a small glass bottle. This is. Yes, it's the most effective combination I've ever found. Sigh. With a short sigh, my body staggered. Mississippi, Florentia. Mississippi. If it weren't for Claravan who caught me fast, I would have fallen in there. Are you all right? Claravan asked in a worried voice. I muttered to such a Claravan without time to answer. Fortunately. I'm so glad there's a cure. I'm afraid. Even though it was a future that I already knew. I was so afraid I'd lose my father again. Mississippi. Laurel calms my trembling shoulders. It's not complete yet. We need to give Gallahan.Nim a dose first. How long will it take? Until the medicine works. We'll know in 2 days. You must be tired, but can you meet my father now? Of course, Mississippi. Esther happily said and packed some medicine and books together. Asterisk 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 no. No. Whoa. It's made me frustrating. Hearing the words Dr. O'Malley shouted, I eventually sighed. .1 This is how things started. When I took Esther to my father. Just in time, my grandfather was visiting with Dr. O'Malley to treat my father's indigestion. It was a kind of complication that came as the amount of activity decreased sharply. Dr. O'Malley, who saw Esther, immediately changed his face. After a year later, that bad feeling didn't seem to go away. And when I explained the situation, Esther pulled out a vial. Dr. O'Malley went off like that. Unverified drugs. And a medicine made by a young novice, one Dr. O'Malley shouted. How can you give it to Gallahan.Nim? Maybe he realized where he was now. His voice had gotten smaller, but Dr. O'Malley was still angry. Noisy, doctor. Eventually, I heard a word from my grandfather, who frowned. Ha, but, Lord. This is really dangerous. Dr. O'Malley said, turning his head and staring at Esther. Did you say your name, Esther? Yes, Esther, who, by the grace of the Lombardy family, is researching at the Academy, Lord. So it just so happens that what you've been working on at the Academy is Tlenbro's medicine. Luckily. Grandpa's sharp eyes turned to Esther. Yes, it is. In fact, when I was studying other diseases, I found that the combination I created was finally effective in Tlenbro. But Gallahan just happened to have Tlenbro disease. I heard a story about the illness in a letter sent by Miss Florentia. How can I remain silent, for Lombardy? Esther responded nicely, but my grandfather kept looking at her. Thank you for coming a long way. Breaking the tense atmosphere, my father said. What is the medicine made of? The main ingredient is a medicinal herb called rose/rosin, and it is a medicine that is a mixture of several medicinal herbs. Here is a list. Esther looked at the list without hesitation, and my father read it. He read many books and was educated, so he had a good knowledge of herbal medicine. There are a lot of herbal names that I've never seen before. If you look for them in this book here. If possible, can I borrow that book for the day? Oh, yes. At the request of my father, Esther nodded. My father put the book aside and said calmly. Actually, from this morning, my left foot feels weird. Perhaps. My grandfather spilled his voice. So, at the moment when my heart became impatient, I heard this news. My father looked at the small vial. No. Dr. O'Malley shouted and intervened. For the sake of Gallahan.Nim's comfort, I can never condone as my doctor too. He held it for my father's safety, but why could I see the fear on the doctor's face? Why does he seem worried that he will lose his place? Despite all kinds of humiliation, Esther remained calm. She showed everything she had and stood back so my father could make a choice. Medicine from a pharmacist who hasn't even been properly trained. It's dangerous, too. The doctor was pointing a finger at Esther. Trust me, and it's wise to treat the symptoms slowly. The beating in my chest was loud. Then my father looked at me. As if to ask for my opinion. It's not like there's any other medicine anyway. Everyone looked at me at my words. I mean, I want you to trust Esther's medicine. I know this medicine is the only cure for my father's illness. But I didn't push ahead from the beginning because I wanted to make sure my father was willing to try the medicine. Okay, let's do that. My father's worries were not long. Please, Estra. I'll do my best, Gallahan.nim. Estra bent down deeply. This is a ridiculous decision. You'll regret it, too. Dr. O'Malley slammed the door and walked away. And that day, my father drank the first cure. Asterisk asterisk asterisk, what do you mean now? What do you mean the cure doesn't work? I can't believe my ears. What? It's not exactly ineffective, but it's only half as effective as it's intended. Esther said with her eyes closed. I'm sorry, Mississippi. No way. No way. You can't do that. Point one. Esther is definitely the one who made the cure, so my father who took it should get better. How come? And at that moment the alarm rang in my head. Esther's medicine may be different from that one of my previous life. Evidently, Esther is younger and has less research experience than she was then. So much has changed. I can't see anything clear yet. That's when I stared blankly at one place. Beep. The door opened and Claravan jumped in. Angina's copied the ready. Where business? I beg your pardon. Angina's is trying to get approval from His Majesty the Emperor to run a ready. Where business in the form of a clothing store in the West. The crazy ones. The ready. Where business was currently settled down as a specific description of our Gallahan's clothing store. There is no patent, but it was a business of Gallahan Lombardy, guaranteed by the Emperor because my father was awarded the founding medal for ready-made clothes. Knowing that well, Angina's is also trying to get permission from the Emperor. Being greedy and not knowing that your place, you'll be torn. The ready. Where business at Gallahan clothing store was not simply created by my father's skills. It was the result of the Lombardy family's top, textile, and personal connections. Angina's can never handle it. Claravan, right now. When I was just about to give Claravan instructions, the door opened again with a loud noise. Tia. Tia. They were Shannonette's twins. They rushed to me and hugged me tightly, but my face is all messed up with tears and a runny nose. Why are you two? Plus, hey, I heard it. Gallahan.nim. It's Tlenbr's disease. My father's illness is a secret that no one knows except for those very close and Dr. O'Malley. I asked, grasping the twins' shoulders. Where did you hear that? There was a rumor in the mansion. We heard the maid say. Damn it. If employees make a fuss, it means everyone in the mansion already knows. Chapter 68. You are listening at novelfull.audio. I sent the twins back for now. They were sad to see my face after a long time, but I send them away. They were very careful to treat me, perhaps because they thought my father's condition would hurt me. Dovico, Claravan and Estra were still in front of me. I found a chair and sat down. And I've sorted out the situation now. My hands were cold. I also closed my eyes. Just calm down. I have to think of a way that can solve these problems. I continued breathing in and out for a long time. In the beginning, it wasn't easy either. My heart that is beating fast keeps disturbing my mind. But I remember my father. My father, who hasn't been awake in a long time recently, because of the painkillers he was taking for the pain when his condition got worse. Things that happened when my father was weak can never be coincidences. I made up my mind and just thought that I should move on. Then, like a lie, the trembling died down. The thoughts that were scattered in chaos gathered together and began to gradually get sorted. When my thoughts died down enough, I opened my eyes and said. Estra. Yes, Mississippi. What's the problem with the drug now? Precisely, explain it briefly. Estra agonized for a moment and said. We need a medium to stabilize the mixed herbs. We need to find that one material. That's a relief. Estra's medicine is not far from finished. Come up with it, come up with it. I have read Esther's autobiography in my previous life. I have no background in herbs, so my memory of the original content is weak, but it is worth thinking about. The difference between past Esther and the current Esther. A vacation in about 5 years has led me to my hometown. The study was sluggish with no results, and I was lucky enough to find the answer where I found it with a tired body and mind. Yes, there was such a thing. Maybe both then and now Esther was blocked by the same wall in the course of the study. Esther, have you told your grandmother back home what's going on? Oh, no. I thought I'd keep it a secret. I'll send someone right away, so send a letter to your grandmother. She has been making medicine for a longer time than Esther. Oh, yeah. If it was Grandma, she might know. Esther's face was filled with joy. I wrote a little note for Esther to show to Butler John, and Esther left the room without delay. And Claravan. The rumors of angines and my father's diseases are closely related. It's a bad time. Rumors that Galahad had Tlenbrough's disease amid conversations with the Suso family about opening a branch to the south would be fatal. That's what they're planning. It will be the work of angines. I don't know how they found my father sick, but I have to move carefully for today. Do you think the Suso family already knows? Claravan asked me. If it were Mrs. Susso's personality, she couldn't have believed it immediately after hearing the words. It's not completely different from the Lombardy family. They would have confirmed to us in any form. I'm glad to hear that. There's not much time before Mrs. Suso hears the news. We need to move fast. You said Angines was in the palace now, right? Yes, that's right. I heard they passed through the palace gates, so I've been waiting for your orders. I agree with Claravan that there is no time. We have to move fast. I'll take care of Mrs. Suso. Claravan has a place to go right away. Tell me, Mississippi Florentia. Claravan stood up and said, packing up his coat. Luckily, I knew someone who could help us now. Go out and meet my grandfather right now. Tell my grandfather about this situation and ask him to go straight to the palace. Seeing the emperor is not easy for the highest-ranking aristocrats. Sometimes you have to wait a few days. But if it was my grandfather, he can go straight away from Lombardy to the emperor's office. He may be able to catch up with Angina's plan. Watching Claravan's out from the back, I opened my father's door, which was tightly closed. Daddy, Daddy. Galahad opened her eyes to a small hand that shook his shoulder. Well, Tia. How long he has been asleep. The stiff eyes showed a hazy world only after blinking a few times. Dad, just wake up for a second. There is something I must say. Galahad clasped his daughter's small hand, which was still in one hand. He was trying to make sure he wasn't dreaming by being drunk. It must be difficult, but I'm sorry. Our Tia has nothing to be sorry about. I'm more sorry because Dad keeps sleeping. In the meantime, Galahad struggled with the eyelid that kept trying to close. What do you have to say, Tia? There's a rumor going around that my dad is sick. What? Galahad's illness was to be kept secret until the end. It was important for Galahad's clothing store, and most importantly for Tia. No, how? Who the hell? Galahad muttered in confusion. One word from his daughter stopped him. Dad. Tia. Galahad wondered, oh, is that a dream? It's because her daughter's face looks a little different every day. Her face still looked childlike, but on top of it was a much more mature face. It was as if he was drunk and hallucinating. I want to explain everything, but I don't have time right now. So I'll tell you right away. Please write me a letter. Letters. To whom? To Mrs. Suso. Tia quickly brought a low-sitting desk, letter paper, and writing instruments to use in bed. The letter is simple. Sorry, I didn't tell you about this illness before. I'm calming myself right now. But I'm sending this letter to someone I trust, so I want you to trust me and wait a little longer. Galahad held a quill as his daughter gave him. When he had just put the tip of his pen on the paper, he looked at Florentia. His eyes were filled with a lot of things. It was calm but full of things in his eyes. That if you put out the urgent fire. Will you tell me then, Tia? He knew his daughter was different. Although she was timid and vulnerable, she was always faster than anyone else to learn. In the past and the present. She was a lovely daughter than anyone else, but he had a hunch that maybe she had a secret that he didn't know. I promise, Dad. Listening to Tia, Galahad moved the quill without hesitation. From beginning to end, he wrote it down as Tia told. In the end, he dipped his pen deep in ink and took it out, leaving a powerful signature that did not appear to belong to a sick person. Galahad folded the letter, giving it to Florentia, and asked. May I ask who will deliver this letter? Looks like he won't send a letter if it's held by someone else. It was a vague guess, to the point of calling it as a father's instinct. Tia looked surprised for a moment, then smiled. I'm going to ask Aunt Shaunannette. Before long, Tia ran out of the room after leaving a kiss on Galahad's cheek. Anginas's lord was sitting in the right place without even moving. He was in stark contrast to Croydon, the owner of Duroc, who couldn't stand still for a while and was impatient. How long has it been since we arrived here now? I mean. Yes, maybe 4 hours have passed. I see. Jovans was currently hosting a meeting of 80 people instead. It was a meeting that no one could predict how many hours it would last, but according to what the servant just announced, the meeting was almost at the end. Oh, when did he come? Croydon said nervously, looking at the door that wouldn't open. When the king comes, Croydon, you just shut up. I'll take care of it. Croydon nodded and agreed. If he opened his mouth in front of His Majesty, he might be relieved of the tension. Ho, even if His Majesty tells you to speak, I will answer. Brack. The door opened without warning and Emperor Jovans walked in. Croydon turned white and jumped up from the seat of Anginas. I can't believe you were here without an appointment. What the hell is going on? Although he was the father of the Empress and his father.in.law. There was no respect for his father.in.law in Jovan's face. Rather, he felt very uncomfortable because he couldn't go to the hawk hunt that was scheduled after the competition. Anginas's lord said with a friendly smile that did not suit him. I took the liberty of visiting your majesty because I wanted your permission. Permission? Since when did Anginas need my permission? We, Anginas, always move for the prosperity of your majesty and the empire. That's why I came to see you again this time. We need your special permission. That's a long introduction. So what family are you going to attack this time? At present, the Lambrou Empire was saturated. There were too many so-called central nobles or higher nobles. To squeeze in the gap and settle down, Anginas has been taking things from other families in the meantime. This was the case with the Brown family, whose castle was taken for the first time, and surrounding nobles who took their territory by making them indebted. Naturally, the enemies would definitely continue to grow, and if it weren't for the Empress to be the daughter of Anginas's lord, they would have become public enemies and perish. The Lombardy family. What? What did you just say? I told you it was the Lombardy family. Are you crazy now? Jovans shout angrily from the bottom of his heart. Is this the Empress? What the hell? What does Anginas have against Lombardy, so that it always puts this burden on them? Galahad Lombardy is suffering from Trenbrou's disease. Galahad has Trenbrou's disease. Yes, so the survival of the ready.to.wear business is at stake. It's hard for a clothing store to survive without its founder, Galahad. How many imperial people would suffer from that? That, are you sure? The illness of Galahad. Yes, I heard it directly from Galahad's doctor. Ha! It was difficult. In celebration of the Ready.to.wear business, I even gave him the founding medal. It's like bragging about the prosperity of the empire under the rule. So we, Anginas, are going to try to make that Ready.to.wear thing. Give me your permission, your majesty, give me a moment to think. Jovans tried to seriously consider the proposal of Anginas as lord. No need to think, your majesty. Until Lolac Lombardy opened the door with a relaxed look. Chapter 69. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. The situation itself is like entertainment. Lolac's face was full of smiles, but his collar smelled like the wind. 1. He ran from Lombardy to here without delay. What the hell are you doing? Ferdinand Anginas, the head of Anginas, shouted when pointed his finger at Lolac. Even though you are the head of Lombardy, it definitely crossed the line to break into His Majesty's office. Crossed the line. So why are you here? Ask His Majesty to give Galahad's business for you. Well, how did you? When I know Anginas finds out the secrets of my family, I can't help but read your dirty tricks. Lolac stepped forward and walked in towards Ferdinand Anginas. Lolac's shadow fell over the short and slender Ferdinand. Did you say I have crossed the line a while ago? Well, yes. How dare you come to His Majesty's office? Lolac raised a hand threateningly, which seemed would twist Ferdinand Anginas's neck, who repeatedly said the same thing as a parrot. Ugh. Ferdinand, who was under pressure, had to clench his teeth to avoid screaming at the strong grip that seemed to crush his shoulder. Lolac leaned over to Ferdinand's ear and spoke softly. Did you sell your conscience and your head, Ferdinand? So only Ferdinand Anginas can listen. Just like you who didn't move at all, if I made a move, Anginas would be like you. What, are you threatening me now? Yes, this is a threat. So listen to me, Ferdinand Anginas. Lolac's voice became even lower. From the moment you set foot in the imperial palace to steal the Ready.to.wear business when you heard that my son was ill, you've crossed the line. His wrinkled brown eyes were glowing blue with anger. You just crossed the line that was protecting Anginas from me with your feet. Do you understand, Ferdinand? Ferdinand Anginas swallowed his saliva. Although he knew that Lolac was ruthless when it comes to his heredity, it was moved under thorough calculations that things might turn out like this. Somehow, he kept thinking that he had crossed a line that he shouldn't have crossed, as Lolac said. Regret was raising inside Ferdinand's head. And as if reading his mind, Lolac said with a smirk on his wrinkled face. Okay. You will be thinking about it countless times in the future. Regret it, again and again. I shouldn't have touched Galahad back then. Lolac, who tightly grabbed Ferdinand Anginas's shoulder, turned around. It's been a while, Duroc owner. So, I'm sorry. Croydon Anginas apologized involuntarily. No. Don't apologize now. There will be a lot of things to apologize for in the future. Lolac said with a smile, but Duroc owner's face grew even whiter. Ferdinand Anginas looked at Emperor Jovans belatedly asking for help, but the emperor was only sipping alcohol with a bystander's face. 3. So did Galahad really have Clenbra disease? Are the rumors true? The emperor asked Lolac. That's right. Ugh. Then it will be difficult. You have nothing to worry about it, your majesty. But if it's Clenbra disease, next season. Jovans also looked down at Lolac's eyes and spoke less. But what he meant was the same as what he had already said. Galahad is currently under treatment. Therapy. But isn't there a cure for Clenbra disease? So far it has been. Lolac paused for a moment. A new treatment has been developed. He is recovering very quickly. So Galahad will be fine. That. A bewildered cry erupted from Ferdinand Anginas. Clenbra's cure is nonsense. Galahad Lombardy might be better. Lolac moved, knowing he would be angry, but because he calculated that if he could have a ready where business was worth to risk. But if Gallahan really survived? A cold sweat falls from his back. What if Gallahan doesn't recover? What are you going to do then? Jovans looked at Lulak with snake-like eyes. At that time, Lombardy would take responsibility and continue the business. It won't happen. Gallahan will get up and show up. Lulak said that and left the office. Last but not least, he won't forget to stare at Furtick Angina's. Well, let's just watch it. The healthy Gallahan will not die. Jovan said, waving his glass in peace. Furtick Angina's had to swallow bitter water. Mrs. Suso stared and sitting in front of Shaunanet. To hear rumors about Gallahan's illness. Is this the way Lombardy treats the family he wants to do business with? I'm sorry I couldn't tell you in advance. Shaunanet politely bowed her head. Seeing that, Mrs. Suso was even angrier. Give me an excuse. Only then will I be able to trust Gallahan and start a big business. Auntie. After Shaunanet called Mrs. Suso in a quiet voice, she took out a letter from her arms. It was Gallahan's letter. After opening it, Mrs. Suso let out a low voice. Dear Aunt Beatrix. By now, I'm guessing that you must have been very upset when you heard about my situation. I was going to tell you when the time came, but I would be lying to my aunt. It was in the best interests of the younger brother, who was in the hospital, to get this job done properly by Gallahan for the future of my daughter Tia. I tried to keep it a secret for as long as possible, without anyone knowing. However, in this circumstance where everything is known, I would like to ask my aunt for a frivolous request. Trust me and wait a while. If you don't believe me for trying to deceive you, aunt, please trust the person who took this letter. We will do our best to bring the good news to you in person. From Gallahan, the cunning guy. I thought he was just a gentle and tender guy. He almost like his father. Point 2 Isn't it heartbreaking to get angry at a sick nephew when he lies for his daughter and says auntie? Point 1 Mrs. Suso, who had anger in her face, asked Shaunanet. I will come and tell you in person. What does this mean? That is. Shaunanet tried to hide her confusion. Although she did not express it, she was trying to accept all these situations as much as Mrs. Suso. While preparing to welcome them after hearing that Gallahan has Trenbrough's disease, Florentia visits Shaunanet. Then, with a letter from Gallahan, Shaunanet was asked to meet Mrs. Suso. Along with the request, please come as Shaunanet Lombardy, not my father's older sister. One of the researchers, a Lombardy scholarship student, has just invented and brought a cure for Trenbrough. So, you mean Gallahan might be better? He is under treatment. It's the same with Gallahan and Shaunanet, siblings can't lie. Mrs. Suso looked at Shaunanet with narrow eyes. What if I believe and wait, and that belief betrayed me? Angina's could come at any moment to take Suso's hand and jump in. Also. Shaunanet confirmed what she had guessed and clenched her fists. Auntie, Gallahan is my younger brother, but he's stupidly incapable of lying. It would have been better if he acted a little weaker, but he's a fool who can't. It had only been a few hours since I heard the news that such a younger brother had an incurable disease. However, there was no room for mourning and confusion for Shaunanet now. It was best for Gallahan, his younger brother, who was in the hospital, to finish this job well. I believe Gallahan is doing the best he can to overcome his illness at this moment. But, if Gallahan doesn't live up to his promise. Shaunanet remembered the words of her young nephew. Please come as Shaunanet Lombardy, not my father's older sister. Did the child even expect a situation like this to come? Shaunanet smiled softly at the futile thought. Then, looking directly at Mrs. Suso. Then please trust Lombardy. Gallahan is the founder of Gallahan Clothing Store, but he is also the son of Lord Lulak Lombardy. And Lombardy never disappoints those who believed in him and worked with him. A moment of silence passed. And Mrs. Suso let out a low sigh. Tell Gallahan not to worry about Suso and just focus on treatment. Be sure to keep that in mind that I'll hear back soon. Yes, Aunt. Jeanette got up from her seat, hiding her slightly trembling hands inside the sleeves of her wide dress. And, Jeanette. Mrs. Suso said when she rubbed her forehead with a tired face. Will you tell your husband to stop persuading us, since we don't want to sell the mine we are in? Mine. Jeanette was perplexed for a moment, then hid her expression and nodded her head. Yes, Aunt. I will do that. Asterisk 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 3 weeks have passed since the commotion. Fortunately, all of the things that happened at once came to an end, but they were all just temporary measures. The only solution is to create a cure for Tlenbro and heal my father. Estera is doing her best to research but hasn't found a cure yet. My father's illness was steadily getting worse, just like in his last life. That I will be back. And in this situation, I had to enter the palace to play the role of Perez's playmate. I want to stay next to him, but my father pushed me to go and play with Perez to get some air and refreshing. It's what my father wants, but I can't not go. I got into the carriage with a gloomy face. It took hours to arrive at the Imperial Palace from the Lombardy mansion, all kinds of thoughts ran through my head. And finally, we arrived at Poirac Palace, where Perez lived. Tia, hello. Perez greeted me with a smile that seemed almost invisible. Hi. Frankly, I was annoyed. In this situation, I want to spend even one more hour with my father. The time I spent with Perez was wasted. Perez, who received my dry greeting, stared at my face for a moment. It was one of his habits. Go. Then Perez's hand grabbed my hand. What? Where are we going? A place to play today. I'm not in the mood to play. I know. What the hell do you know? It was time for my patience to run out. Perez opened the large door with his other hand, which was not holding mine. Here. The library at Poirac Palace. Here's a collection of Tlenbro disease books and herbal medicine. As much as I can find. Perez said when he pulled out the chair from the table in the middle of the library. Let's find out about Tlenbro disease together. If we look, we may find a way. Perez. This time I will help you. Underscore 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 glossary. 1. Smile like a wind. Seems like a phrase to describe someone who just walked in after a brisk walk in cold windy weather. Chapter 70. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Perez's statement that he has collected as many as possible books are true. Where did you get all these books from? I brought it from the Imperial Library in the Central Palace, and these herbal medicine books were the ones I had originally. The looks of turning the pages while answering seemed very familiar. With a sudden thought, I asked Perez. Perez, by any chance, have you been researching Tlenbro's drugs by yourself? Look. Perez's shoulders shuddered. And if there was no answer, it was evidence. Perez would rather lie to me than say nothing. Thanks. Perez's ears turned red when he looked at the book without saying a word. I smiled silently and picked up a book. Yeah, it doesn't suit my personality to leave everything to Estera and relax. It would be more convenient to do whatever it takes to find the last piece of Tlenbro's medicine. While we spent time reading in the library, Caitlin and Kailis took turns delivering food and drinks. Ugh, my waist. How many hours have passed? I raised my head in pain when my back was suddenly hurt. It was already past afternoon. Looking at Perez, who was sitting on the other side, he still hadn't taken his eyes off the book. Beside him was a mountain of books he had already skimmed through. It was when I was looking out the window because I didn't want to disturb Perez, who was concentrating. Shall we go out for a moment? Suddenly, Perez looked at me. The garden is pretty nice for a walk. Contrary to Perez's simple impression, the gardens of Poirac Palace were very beautiful. As if knowing that the owner of this palace often visits the garden, all kinds of flowers and trees naturally blended together around the promenade. Oh, this flower. Isn't that the flower you sent me before? I asked, pointing to a red flower that looked familiar somewhere. That's right. Balmia flowers. It's a different season than you sent me this flower. Previously it had bloomed and fallen last spring. But for some reason, it seems to bloom once more this year. What? That's interesting. It blooms twice a year. I approached and smelled the sweet scent of the flower. Talk. Perez picked a balmia flower and handed it to me. He tore off the sweet petals and put them in his mouth. If I keep following this road, what will I find? Central Palace Hall. Like that. When I moved my body a little, my head seemed to clear up. How far did we walk? At the end of the road, the hall that Perez spoke of seemed to be visible. And there is a person who was just walking through the hall, that I didn't want to meet. Let's go back. Okay. Perez answered with a frown on his forehead as if it was bothering him at all. We turned around and tried to go back the way we came. Hey, there you two. Until an unlucky voice dares to follow us. Whoa. I already have a bad feeling. I engraved my patience, turned around, and greeted. Hello, His Majesty the First Prince. Yes. You were right. Astana approached with an unlucky smile. Perez was already staring at Astana with cold eyes. Feels like he's about to draw a sword like last time. Let's just go quietly this time. I swore so. But that promise was immediately shaken by Astana's words. I heard that Galahad Lombardy had a fatal disease. You crazy bastard. Without realizing it, cursing came out of my voice. Astana widened her eyes in surprise. You dare to curse at me? Watching Astana squirm silently like a goldfish, I tried to calm my mind again. I was so angry because it was about my father. But, ominously, I saw something from Astana's face. It was a grinning smile as if he had found a weakness that could haunt me. Your father is dying, and you are hanging out with that lowly man in the imperial palace. Are you really his daughter? Stop. Perez next to me said in a low voice warning him. But Astana shrugged her shoulders once and continued to sarcastic. If it were my father, I would never leave his bed for a moment. After all, I don't mean to say that lowly things are lowly for nothing. Astana. Your mother is a wanderer of unknown origin, so it's obvious. Shut your mouth. Perez said while placing his hand on the handle of the sword. I know, wanderers sell themselves to anyone to find a place to sleep for a night. Slap. Astana's face turned to the side with a loud sound. Red handprints slowly appeared on his cheeks. It was me who slapped that cheek with all my might. Point 2, you hit me. Astana touched his cheek with one hand and murmured. I stared straight at him. Tears flowed involuntarily at the outrageous anger. I'm going to tell my mother, no, to His Majesty the Emperor. For a slap on my cheek. I knew his personality was at the bottom. Trash guy. Do it. I'll be sure to tell Grandpa what happened today. I spoke to Astana. Every single word. Only then did he recall what I said. Astana's stupid face distorted. It doesn't matter even if he's a prince when it comes to Lombardy. He also said such dirty things about Lombardy Lord's son and his late wife, who are now in bed. There's no way it's going to pass safely. I want to kick him between the crotch, not the cheek. I'm still not Lords of Lombardy, please be patient. I stared at him till the end and turned around. I wiped away my tears roughly with my sleeve. The taste that had been sweet a little while ago because of the Bomnia has turned bitter. *******. I was ordered into self-reflection for a month because of slapping Astana's face. Of course, it's not a big deal. Rather, I had a hard time stopping my grandfather from running to kick Astana. .1 In fact, I'm not free to leave the mansion until after my 11th birthday, it's like I'm not being punished. Astana, who likes to wander around all the time, was ordered to probation for 2 months. I was sitting in my study, browses through the herbal book I had borrowed from Perez. I don't have a plausible background here, so I don't expect to make a huge discovery that even Estra couldn't find through a book like this. It was simply because I felt comfortable doing anything to find my father's cure. Flap, flap. When I was flipping a book with my chin on one side. Ha! Bomnia flowers. It can also be used as a medicinal herb. I stopped at a familiar flower picture and read the description. Bomnias is a plant that grows only in the southernmost tip of the continent, and its flowers, leaves, and roots have different properties of efficacy. My fingertips, which were pointing meaninglessly, stopped. But the most powerful effect of Bomnia is when the flowers, leaves, and roots are used together. The exact mechanism is unknown, but it reliably maximizes the efficacy of other herbs used together. One originally from the south. And Estra from her previous life went on vacation to her hometown. The puzzle seemed to fit. At that moment, the study door opened and Estra entered. Sweating and gasping, she seemed to have run all the way here. Ha, I got a reply from my grandmother. Among the flowers that are commonly blooming around the village. Bomnia. How did you know? Also. The last ingredient in the remedy was Bomnia. Estra, who looked at my smiling face, said while crying. By the way, Bomnia is a wild plant that grows only in the south, and the flowering period has already passed. No. I know where the flowering Bomnia is. The bright red Bomnia flowers were blooming in the backyard of Poirac Palace. I quickly ran to my desk and wrote a letter. The recipient was Perez. Though in my heart I would like to run to Poirac Palace and bring Bomnia flowers by myself. I can't enter the palace because of the self-isolation period. Damn it, Astana. I wrote the words that I needed the Bomnia flower for my father's treatment and that the flowers, leaves, and even the roots had to come together. My hand that was folding the stationery was trembling. The joy of finding the last puzzle was brief, and anxiety overtook me. What if the Bomnia flowers have been chopped in a couple of days? Perez also said. The flowers didn't bloom at this season. Please, please. I prayed earnestly and sent the letter. It began to rain at night. I was staying up all night watching the heavy rain outside. Damn it, damn it. I heard the sound of rain hitting the window and me biting my nails. What if the Bomnia flowers are chopped down in this rain? The last time we saw each other was a few days ago. If all the remaining flowers fall off. I felt like my stomach was burning. It was then. Is that a carriage? With my head in the window, I doubted my eyes. A carriage was coming to the annex through heavy rain like a pole. At first glance, through the hazy raindrops, the imperial pattern was seen. Surely. I ran downstairs in surprise. Bang, bang, bang. With a heavy knock on the door, the butler of the annex was already approaching the door with his back. Quiet. The door, which had been closed all night, opened with a long noise. A man drenched in the rain was standing there. Perez. Perez found me and pulled out something he was holding dearly in his arms. It was a large wooden box. Click. With a small noise the cover was opened. There was a distinct smell of wet soil from the rain. .1 Inside the box was a pile of red flowers covered in soil, quietly exposed to the roots. Bomnia flowers, I brought them. With a pale and wet face, Perez grinned widely.